More than 250,000 people in Britain have an adverse drug reaction to a prescription medication given to them by their doctor each year. Many more suffer, but most reactions go unreported. Prescription medication now kills more people than illegal drugs. So are we safe? This is a story of 3 people who say they've been let down by the healthcare regulator and pharmaceutical industry. Les Thomas is from Cambridgeshire. He's been seriously ill since taking part in a trial for a drug that was already on the market. He says Vioxx, a popular arthritis medication, ruined his life.
I came very, very close to dying, and that basically is the reason why I have to take 2 sets of tablets each day. We'll have to do that for the rest of my life, because the illness I was left with is incurable.
He had an adverse drug reaction and says no one tried to find out what happened.
This is the result of the drugs I am currently taking, and also of the drugs that were given to me in hospital to combat the adverse drug reaction which I suffered. This letter is a report about that drug reaction, and it says, "Thank you for your adverse drug reaction, report of hepatorenal failure and subsequent death. As far as I'm concerned, I am not dead yet, but it does indicate a rather lax attitude by MHRA."
Only months after he took the drug, it was removed from the market.
A drug used to treat arthritis could have caused the deaths of tens of thousands of patients in the US. That's according to new research published in the medical journal The Lancet. The drug called Vioxx was widely prescribed in Britain before it was withdrawn last year.
Each year, the NHS spends more than £7 billion on prescription medicines. Before a drug can be sold, it must be found to be safe by the regulatory body.
Yeah, Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, or MHRA, is responsible for making sure that medicines and medical devices work and that they're acceptably safe. Now you're asking specifically about medicines, and this is done through a large number of processes that make sure that the medicines that reach the market and that are used by members of the public are safe, and that we know how they work and that we're continually monitoring their safety.
But Les feels like important information about the drug was kept from him.
Now, there is no mention of colitis, the illness I suffer from, as a side effect of the drug that was being trialled. This is odd because it was known in 2002, that is 2 years before I started on the trial, that colitis was in fact a known side effect of the drug. Why was it omitted from the patient information sheet?
In Peterborough, Matthew Hulford said he was ignored when he suffered an adverse drug reaction to an antidepressant.
My doctor gave me an odd blister pack of fluoxetine, and I went home and I took those for a couple of days, started feeling suicidal. There was never any acceptance that their fixes had actually made me worse.
On the 26th of February 2008, his fears were confirmed.
It seems that drugs may not work as well as their manufacturers say. Research carried out by an international team of scientists suggests new generation antidepressants, household names like Prozac and Seroxat, are no more effective than dummy pills for most people prescribed them.
A decade ago, they looked as if they were very effective, but that was because quite a lot of the data on the antidepressants hadn't in fact been published, so it wasn't in the public domain. So when people were doing a review or universities were trying to assess whether these things worked, they had no access to what we call the full data set. And this is in some ways, A, it's not illegal, and B, it would make legitimate business sense to do.
But how does this get past the MHRA? The UK Panel for Research Integrity says there are no safeguards against fraud.
The great issue here is that you don't know precisely how much of which behaviours are taking place. So you don't know whether there's lots of people plagiarising or nobody plagiarising. whether there's lots of people changing their results a little bit, a lot, you just don't know.
Every drug must be trialled before it can be sold. The results are turned into a report of safety and efficacy, but the only way to check the findings are accurate is to see the data in its original form, before it has been written into a report. This is called unblinded data.
Okay. And does the MHRA ever inspect unblinded data?
What's the question?
Does the MHRA ever inspect the unblinded data?
The Health Select Committee report in 2004 and 2005 found that
the MHRA relies on company data presented as a series of detailed assessment reports in its decision whether or not to license a drug. Raw data is very rarely analysed.
We will request the data in whatever form we feel is necessary to make a safe judgment on whether or not the product's appropriate for market.
some say there is enough information in this report to know if a drug is safe.
The industry as a whole is very strongly regulated. There are many layers of regulation there. So I think really in terms of safety it probably doesn't change a great deal.
But others say the MHRA is not doing enough to protect people.
The regulators or the licensing authority must be much more vigorous in pursuing data and unpublished data from pharma companies. It's very easy to spin data, very easy to manipulate figures, and you know there's lots of examples of this.
And the drug regulator simply accepts that summary from the pharmaceutical company with blind faith. In other words, they very rarely ask questions about the probity of data analysis. They never ask questions about whether the data analysis might have been cheated in any way.
Aubrey is speaking from experience. Until mid-2006, he was a professor and researcher at Sheffield University.
I started asking some questions about a clinical trial in which we were involved. The trial involved a drug produced by Procter & Gamble called Actonel. I believe that they'd misrepresented the results in this particular study, and they had attempted to publish the results of the study in the names of university academics at Sheffield University, including myself. And I objected to this, and eventually, after a period of time, went to the media.
Aubrey was suspended from his job. He now uses the internet to raise awareness about problems in the industry.
The entire scientific process involving drugs goes through this sort of ghosting process, where the authors of the science are in fact not the authors, but they're not involved in fact in any part of the scientific process.
The Health Select Committee report agrees. It also found that
the MHRA has failed to adequately scrutinise licensing data, and its post-marketing surveillance is inadequate.
Each of these men have something in common. They're fighting to change the regulation of the MHRA. In March 2008, the government promised new laws to force drug companies to give all their trial results to the MHRA. But some are still doubtful that this will be enough.
He knew that the drug was dangerous. They'd been told. Other reports, other trials have shown its dangers.
With the regulator already too dependent on drug company reports, will this new law be enough to protect people from lethal but legal drugs?